Bitcoin is putting in its golden cross dump, just like we've seen before. Is this little pullback going to continue, or are we going to find support? Taking a look at ETH in Bitcoin terms, we've seen some really nice ETH outperformance over the last couple of weeks, bouncing off of a relative low. Will we see continuation? ETH in US dollar terms, sitting at 200-day SMA resistance. Are we going to see a breakout, and where's the price target? When is Altseason going to come? Is it going to come? What are some of the drivers that we're watching at Cryptolabs in the Underdog Investor Group and in the Fast Track program to determine when Altseason? Taking a look over here at the long end of the yield curve here in the United States, these are 30-year treasuries. This is one of the indicators that we're using to help us determine when Altseason. And taking a look over here at the NASDAQ, it seems as though that V-shaped bounce from back in COVID, that maybe we're seeing a similar pattern repeat. So let's dive in. BTC. We've seen an interesting pattern repeat a couple of times here in Bitcoin. We've seen, back in August of 2024, we saw this when the 50-day crosses over the 200-day, that's referred to as a death cross. Now remember, this is a lagging indicator, these moving averages. And so for Bitcoin, the pattern that we've seen is that when Bitcoin puts in a death cross, that actually indicates the low. So remember, this is lagging. So when we see this death cross, that marked the lows. Now, the same thing happened just earlier this year. Bitcoin put in a death cross, and what happened? It marked the lows. Now, we also have put in a golden cross here. And so the last time Bitcoin put in a golden cross, what we saw was the golden cross was put in, we rallied up to the old all-time highs from back in March. We put in that golden cross, rallied up to the highs, and then we had a little bit of a golden cross pullback before ripping higher. What do we see now? Well, let me go ahead and remove these drawn objects so this is a little bit less messy. So we had the golden cross. We put in a nice push to the upside, fresh all-time highs up here, and then a nice little pullback, putting in a very similar pattern. So are we going to continue to the upside? I think that could be likely here. But I'm not just watching BTC. I'm also watching Ethereum. Extremely important here because I think it's likely going into the summer, into the fall, that if we see added US dollar liquidity from either the Fed or the Treasury, or maybe some unique mechanism, Fannie and Freddie, something like that, able to inject additional US dollar liquidity, if that happens, this summer, this fall, into 2026, leading up into those midterms, if that happens, I expect that at some point, Ethereum is really going to continue to push higher in BTC terms. I think that we could see real ETH outperformance here. We're just barely bouncing off of the lows. We get a push above the 200-day SMA. We close above the 200-day SMA, and we could see, real momentum get ignited again here in ETH, maybe similar to what we saw last cycle. Rip higher. Now this rip, ETH moving higher in BTC terms, this took place over the course of about 30 days. So very, very short period of time. And so what that tells me is you really need to be in position prior to the move. Let's take a look at ETH. Over here, looking at ETH, we're sitting at 200-day SMA resistance. Now, if I just zoom out for a moment here, 200-day SMA resistance on ETH comes in at roughly 2,700. Now, if we get some real money printing at some point this summer or fall, I think it's likely that Ethereum will push above its 200-day SMA. I mean, hey, this could happen over the next couple of days. Not just push above its 200-day SMA, but I think that once we close above the 200-day at 2,700, then the next level of resistance in my eyes, it's right around 3,400. But I think that we push above the 200-day, and then 4,000 really does come into view. The timing is right. And so if ETH is pushing up towards 4,000, well, that would most likely mean that Bitcoin dominance is breaking down. And if ETH is pushing higher as Bitcoin dominance is breaking down, I think that it's likely that other altcoins start to also outperform Bitcoin on a percentage basis. That's alt season. So what we're looking for is a move similar to this one. This was last cycle. Now the levels that I'm watching for me to determine, when alt season, I'm watching this level. The lows from November, actually this low here is December, but this was, the last mini altcoin rally late last year. And so if Bitcoin dominance is able to break below 54%, well then where is my target? I think that it makes sense to view this range, the mid 40s. Let me go ahead and hide this stuff so that we can see this a bit more clearly. I think it makes a lot of sense here to start to think about, okay, if we get a decline in Bitcoin dominance, that would most likely mean that Ethereum and other altcoins are outperforming Bitcoin on a percentage basis. And so if Bitcoin dominance declines, well, I'm targeting the mid 40s for the end of alt season. If we get down here to the mid 40s on Bitcoin dominance, I will aggressively exit my altcoin positions into BTC. It's not necessarily about a price target. It's more so about a level on Bitcoin dominance, and it's about a level on ETH BTC. If ETH BTC can rip higher as Bitcoin dominance is moving to the downside, that tells me that alt season is upon us. And so I will be aggressively exiting my altcoin positions should Bitcoin dominance break down into the mid 40s. Very, very excited for that. Hopefully that happens this summer. Now, one thing that I'm watching to help me gauge when or if alt season is going to come is the long end of the yield curve here in the United States. And, there has been a bit of a buyer's strike. Sovereigns have been stepping away from the US Treasury market. And, the federal government in the United States needs to fund itself somehow. And maybe that funding comes from the Fed. Maybe some interesting program out of the Treasury helps to fund the US government. But there is massive, massive deficit spending that is going to take place through the rest of this year, and that needs to be paid for somehow. So I'm watching the long end of the yield curve. This is bond futures, 30-year bond futures. Now, the price of bonds is inverse to the yield. And so I'm looking for this level of support to hold. I would like to see yields decline. I think that if yields decline, that means that there are buyers stepping in and buying this toxic sludge. And so if people are stepping in and buying treasuries, yields decline, prices rise. So I think that if we see a declining yield on the 30-year over the next couple of months, that may coincide with a true alt season. I'm also watching US equities here quite closely. And this is an interesting pattern. So this V-shaped bottom from back in COVID, it looks to me like we could be repeating that pattern here. Now, I know that there are a lot of people out there that are concerned about trade uncertainty, trade policy, tariffs, but hey, but when I look at these charts, and specifically when I look at the Mag 7 companies that make up roughly 50% of the NASDAQ, I see businesses that generate billions of dollars in cash flow. And those Mag 7 companies are the most successful businesses in the world. And with AI, I think they're only going to become more successful. So betting against the Mag 7 is not a bet that I'm willing to make. I think that we push to fresh all-time highs here in the NASDAQ, and I think that we could be on the cusp of just a continuation of this bull run. I am extremely bullish here, and I view a pullback as simply an opportunity in Bitcoin to add exposure. I do not expect a big pullback here to the 200-day SMA. Could it happen? Of course. But my market bias is bullish. I am very bullish here, looking forward to the rest of this summer and this fall. I think that the path of least resistance is to the upside. So what are some of my targets? Well, why don't we go ahead and let's just bring up a chart of BTC over here, and let me zoom out, looking for a little bit more data here. Now, I want to zoom out to a weekly. And one thing that I hear people talking about all the time is, well, this time it's going to be different. This cycle, we're not going to see a negative 80% bear market. This cycle is going to be different. Whenever I hear that, I think, well, it's probably not going to be different this time. And so I've got a weekly chart of BTC up here in TradingView. And what I want to highlight is the 200-week moving average. Now, in every previous bear cycle, Bitcoin has retested that 200-week moving average, or broken down below the 200-week. Now, yes, we did have the FTX collapse, but Bitcoin did break down below its 200-week here in 2022. So I'm making this point because you could say to yourself that with Bitcoin at 104.5 right now, 104K, you could say this is expensive Bitcoin because we are quite extended from the 200-week moving average. But we're talking about where are we possibly going to go from here. In previous cycles, bear markets have experienced negative 70 or negative 80, or in the beginning, negative 90% bear markets. Now, I think that the volatility for BTC is going to continue to decline over time. That doesn't mean that we don't see bear markets. It just means, in my opinion, that the troughs are higher than in previous bear markets. So what could that look like? And again, this is just pure speculation here. Bear with me. But if BTC is able to run up to, let's say, how about 200K? Just picking a number. Let's say we get all that fiat money printing and Bitcoin just rips higher and we put in a top at 200K. Well, where would the 200-week moving average be at that point in time? Maybe sometime, in the very beginning of 2026 or the end of this year, if we just run and we have a parabolic run, well, maybe the 200-week moving average comes in at that point around, let's say 65, 70K, something like that. Let's say that it's right about right here. If we see a parabolic run up to 200, then I would expect there to be another bear market. And that bear market, if it is less, if Bitcoin has declining volatility over time, then maybe that bear market is not as deep as previous bear markets. And maybe we come down and retest the 200-week moving average, but Bitcoin is only down 69% rather than in previous cycles being down 77% or 85%. So that would mean declining volatility of Bitcoin over time. We would still be able to put in a great cycle top, but that would present excellent opportunities for investors in DeFi in a bear market. And so what am I thinking about in a bear market? Well, number one, I am very, very bullish on fixed income in DeFi. I think that all of these yield-bearing stables present a phenomenal opportunity in a bear market. In addition to that, I'm really looking into statistical arbitrage, pairs trading. So one of the pairs that I plan to trade in the coming bear market, should it come, is ETH BTC. And so what I'm thinking about here is if Ethereum is able to rally against its Bitcoin pair, I don't expect ETH to be able to hold on to those gains in BTC terms. And so if ETH is able to rally in BTC terms, and if Bitcoin dominance breaks down into the mid 40s, if Bitcoin dominance gets down to 44, 43%, I will aggressively exit all of my altcoin positions into BTC. And then what I will do is I will borrow ETH against my BTC on a money market like Aave. So if Bitcoin dominance gets down to the 40s, I think that would likely mean that ETH BTC is somewhere up here, maybe at like 0.06 or something like that. And so if ETH BTC is up here, then if I supply Bitcoin as collateral and borrow ETH against it on a money market like Aave, take that borrowed ETH, swap it for further WBTC, and supply it, that would allow me to express this opinion that I think that even if Bitcoin depreciates in US dollar terms, I think that Ethereum would depreciate faster in US dollar terms. So that's the pairs trade that I'm looking forward to this bear cycle. I'm also looking forward to some really exciting interest rate arbitrage plays using those yield-bearing stables, maybe looping them on Contango. Lots of opportunities out there. If you're interested in learning more about what we do in the Fast Track program, helping members to build DeFi skill sets and DeFi portfolios, take a look at Fast Track over at cryptolabsresearch.com. Really appreciate everyone's time today, and we'll see you on the next video. Have a good one. Bye-bye now.